Hi, everyone. So I'm Sarah, and like Stina said, my talk is also going to be using and referring to the concept of site specificity. But I think she's already given us a more rigorous understanding of what the term means, so I'm not going to go into it in too much depth. I'm mostly just going to show you some work. When I was reading the brief for today's event, referencing games and protocols as artwork, the piece of my own that I was most reminded of is called ClickMine. It's one of my older works. It's from 2017. And it's a blockchain-based clicker game. This is how it has been installed physically. Because it was 2017, there was no NFT discourse at all at the time. It used an older, the first real token standard we started talking about, which is ERC20. For context, at this time period, it was the first bull rush in crypto, really. ICOs were on everyone's tongue. And so this game is a response maybe to that moment. And of course, it is using a real ERC20 token in its mechanics. So in a clicker game, usually the player interaction is limited to really only two things you can click. And you can purchase various power-ups. So here, at the start of the game, you're sort of given this little plot of land, and as you click, you're mining. And the hole on the screen appears. And as you continue to click, it gets bigger and bigger. It gets deeper and deeper. And you collect more and more of this real ERC20 token. And of course, as you keep clicking, eventually the hole gets bigger and bigger. It gets darker and darker. And eventually, there's nothing left anymore. It's just you in the bottom of this hole with all of your money. But this, and the reason I relate this work to site specificity is because, it is using the same ERC20 token standard as all of the other valuable ERC20 tokens, which has some funny effects. Notably, it appears on Etherscan. Here's someone's balance of ClickMine token. But ClickMine token is a token with some unusual mechanics. You already saw how much someone can accumulate. This is, in scientific notation, 5.7 to the power of 660 right now. So this is a huge number. So here are the token balances of a variety of people who interacted with the game. You can see how much of the token they have, but they still have, I don't know if you can read that, but in the percentage column, it shows the percentage of the total supply of the token that they have. And for all of these people, it is still zero, mathematically implying that the total supply is infinite. And there's some other mechanics within ClickMine that reveal themselves as you play the game. So this is a screen from the final moments of the game, and you can see that I have impronounceable amount of tokens, and I've been clicking and getting more for some time now. And then I click again, and this happens. And I've highlighted the area of interest, which is that you click and suddenly your token balance actually goes down. And this is related to a property of Solidity, the programming language that we write smart contracts in on Ethereum. In the olden days, you had to check all of your math that it wouldn't sort of overflow the integer. And so with ClickMine, I deliberately did not do that, which is to say, at some point, we max out the maximum possible number that the programming languages is capable of doing computation with. And so it wraps all the way back around and starts from 0. And I thought this was very funny in a game about what money is and how money comes to acquire value. Because in some sense it violates the base physics of what money is, you know? Like I receive an additional dollar and I have less than I had before I accepted it. So if you play through ClickMine all the way to the end, you will experience the ultimate financial betrayal. And so, you know, I guess we can conceive maybe of a site-specific artwork for a website, but can a token standard itself be a site for artistic intervention? And that's one of the questions that I think about in relationship to this piece. Here's another work of mine, which I actually won't talk about so much because I talk about it all the time. But this is called Lifeforms, and it's a NFT that dies if you don't give it away within 90 days of receiving it. And this is what they look like online. This is what they look like when they've been installed physically. They go on a very particular, cute, iconic, historical iPhone. Here's another example of that. But they also have these paradoxical effects because they're intervening into the token standard itself in some way. So, you know, the lifeforms also appear on OpenSea, but because they die if you don't give them away, the contract actually stops returning the metadata URL. So OpenSea doesn't really know how to display them after they've died. Eventually, they go away from OpenSea. But they have this limbo state where they appear but can't render properly. I'll show you some other examples of things that might fit under this concept from my work. This is another older piece. So these are all little iframes leading out to the websites of various artists, and it was an experiment in alternative internet navigation tactics. So in today's internet processed by Google, we are used to a very legible and maybe flattened internet, but it's not the internet that I remember from my childhood. So this is an experiment in making websites less legible to the bots that are scraping them all the time. So what the work itself actually was some code delivered by Content Delivery Network that I invited other artists to inject into their website. And it would put one of these portals on their homepage. And so about 30 people participated in this, and my documentation of the project are screenshots of this little portal placed randomly on the websites of other artists. So it's always linking somewhere new randomly. It's always placed somewhere new on the screen. And this randomness gives it some unparsability. Here's another example. And a third one. So also, if you install this on your website, you have to accept that it might just appear over top of some important part of your content that was part of the project. Here's another example. I almost never talk about this project, so I thought I would take the opportunity. This is my first project as an artist. It's not the first artwork I've ever made, but you know, it's the first one that I'll like claim in the lineage of artwork that I make now. So it's called You Are a Rock. And it's a game. It plays in the terminal. So it's not imitating a computer terminal that you might type commands into. It actually is that. And this game is a text-based adventure. And you're playing as a rock. And you know, as a rock, you can't really move or see anything. You don't really have eyes. So instead, as you play the game, you're actually engaging more in a philosophical discourse about what it's like to be a rock. But this is, oh, how are you so sure you have eyes? You are a rock. But as you play, metaphorically speaking, it's building out an analogy from you, a human, playing a game where you speak to a rock, and the experience of learning to program, which is also maybe analogous in some way. This is a kind of highly manufactured rock that I, of course, had to learn to speak to on its own terms. And the text color on the screen that you see is changing color based on the part of speech that the word is. So this is a nod to syntax highlighting in a text editor that you would see when you're programming. And of course, there are a variety of errors that you can experience within the diegetic world of the game. So imagine what language sounds like to a rock. But eventually, as you play through and exhaust all of the error messages that are written into the game, eventually I don't have a screenshot of it, but the final screen of the game is actually just where I crash the Python interpreter. So the last text words of the game are the words of the programming language themselves. So maybe a found text or a kind of site specificity to Python, the programming language that I was using at the time. Here's some other examples. This is, I consider this site-specific work for Instagram. So these are two works that were both created durationally. The first one is called It's Not Flat. And that's the one with the white cable. So this is based on pretty much the thought game of we're very familiar with this Instagram 3-column grid. You know, I see it every day to my great chagrin. But what if, topologically speaking, the grid is actually a cylinder and it wraps around? So this chord is laid out in such a way where, though it is a continuous image, it cannot all be viewed on the screen in 3-column form. That might not make sense. If you keep looking at it, you'll see it. And then the second one with the pink cable and the white cable is called Incompatible Topologies. And it takes the same chord layout that needs to wrap fully around, but it has two cables which both wrap around different spaces. So they are both sort of existing from different cylindrical worlds of Instagram. And of course, this work has never been displayed off Instagram. I also have two works that exist as highlight reels. This is quite old. It's called Possible Faces, and I was interested in the way that face filters and this dialogue about facial recognition being aided by our use of face filters, and I was kind of interested in whether there might be a secondary process by which the face filter makes us indistinguishable to facial recognition too. So I screen capped myself wearing a number of these filters, and then I ran them through a face recognition algorithm to visualize where a face could be detected in the face filtered form and when it couldn't. And I did a whole collection of these in, I think, 2019. And similarly, because I love face filters, but I can't make one because I'm unable to join Facebook because my name is Friend, literally. So these are found face filters. So whenever I find some light effect or weird thing, I collect them as found artworks. And then I'll move into some newer work. So this is a project that started with some observations last year about the ways that engaging as an artist making NFTs positions your work as maybe very parallel to the work of other social media influencers. or other types of online content creators, like, for example, the operator of an OnlyFans page. And these images are made using machine learning. And so I guess to relate this concept of site specificity, I think it's an interesting question when I'm really still thinking about what is a site-specific artwork for a machine learning model. And I think, again, I'm still thinking about this question, but there would be two things for sure. One, it would be definitely engaging with the model itself in the form of training. So I don't think it could be only a prompted work. And secondly, it would need to be a work that also is dealing with what is uniquely afforded by the machine learning model. And this work is both of those things. So I was interested in the methods that model makers use to prevent you from making certain kinds of content with them. Because, of course, there's content that is considered desirable or safe for work and content that isn't. And these networks have various tactics for preventing it. So I did a little surgical removal of some safety checks. And then I did some training on images of myself to make a model that can make these kinds of images of a woman who looks a little bit like a creepy me. And I've continued working in this direction. So I decided to take her to the Dia Beacon to visit the Richard Serra sculptures, which I think is very fitting, Stina ending her talk with Serra. And, also maybe this is a moment for this character to consider her own status as an artwork. And I've also taken her to the data center, which is, again, maybe another way to think about site specificity in the context of digital artwork, because actually, of course, all of these things that we encounter as websites are actually in server racks somewhere. And also, I think it's very interesting because this AI girl is herself actually having the form of the server racks behind her simultaneously. And I only have, this is my second to last slide, so I think I'll be a little early. I have worked also researching data centers extensively. So this is a screenshot from a research project from 2022, where I researched all the data centers in Berlin. I actually visited one of them. I got a tour. I made friends with them because of our mutual love of Star Trek. And I ended up making a half-an-hour-long film about the history of the various buildings, who owns them, the corporate structures of them, as a way to enter thinking about the materiality of the internet. And also, through meeting the people at the data center, I collected a variety of waste materials from the data center that I was able to visit. And I also used those in a body of sculptural work in 2022. So I'm not going to talk about that in too much detail. There are some perspectives on site specificity in a variety of forms through things I've done in the last few years. I do have a bit of time, so if anyone has a question, I'm happy to take it, and if not, I will pass on. Yeah, what you say about people kind of dopamine-driven clicking is even more literal in the case of a blockchain clicker game, because of course the people playing are spending actual money to pay in the form of their transaction fees. And also, just fun fact about this piece, because it's old, it's not gas efficient, like at all. And every click is sending a transaction, so it's actually like really kind of expensive to play in 2024. I really wouldn't recommend it. So there's a question about what immutability means if the work is still there in the exact same form it was deployed in, but it's become prohibitively expensive to engage with. But what motivates people? I don't actually know. That's a great question. I suspect curiosity, to see how things would continue to change, what new items would become available, for example, as they clicked. But I don't have any good quotes about it. I think you spend money to engage with the work in the form of transaction fees, but receive no material value, also shows up in the Lifeforms project as well. So, yeah, thank you.
Hello, hi. When you're probing a deep net, how are you visualizing it?
When I'm programming a what, sorry?
No, when you're probing a deep neural network, how are you visualizing it?
That is a great question. I do not use any of the tools for visualizing, or I have not. I could. It would be interesting to try. Instead, I will train, and then it's almost like probing alien world. And it's very interesting, some of the things that you discover. For just as one example, it is better at making images that look like me when I request environments that are in the source data. Which makes sense on some level if you think about it, like from the perspective of a machine, all pixels in this image are equal. And it has a bunch of pictures of my face in rooms mostly, like inside someone's house, my house usually. But if I ask for photos of Sarah Friend in the forest, that is farther away from the data set in terms of the background image. So actually, the face wavers more in the output as well, which is very interesting because as a human eye, we of course disproportionately weight the face, and the background of the room almost falls out of the image in some sense as like unseen content. But it does not perceive things this way. I also had, because I've been making these images of myself, but it's also been very interesting to me to maybe find others who are interested in exploring these images. So I've worked with some friends to train on data sets of them. And I also found a really fascinating paradoxical effect with a friend whose photos kind of by accident had like a light brown color palette, I would say, overwhelmingly. And I don't have an answer for this, but when we were prompting for images of her, it kept giving us like in the style of historical photos. Again, and this is my guess, I sense that she had kind of accidentally replicated the palette of a scanned historical sepia image. And then an association had been built while we were training. So we actually had to prompt mirror selfie to get a contemporary looking image from that training batch. So this is to say that I haven't visualized it, but I have had all these moments where I feel like I'm trying to map in the dark some alien perception, if that is relevant.
Thank you.
Cool. Thanks for listening, everyone.